There is something nobody tells you when you are young, that the women who frighten you the most are not the loud ones, not the ones with power suits and corner offices and voices that carry across rooms. The women who frighten you most are the quiet ones who have already survived everything you are still afraid of. I know this because I became one of them. And I want to tell you how that happened, because it did not happen the way I expected. It did not arrive as a gift. It did not come wrapped in wisdom or handed down like a family heirloom. It came the hard way. It came through loss and fire and long, silent nights where I had nothing left to hold on to but myself. And what I found when I finally stopped shrinking, what I found when I let go of the life I thought I was supposed to be living, was something so solid, so unshakable, that I have not been the same woman since. I want to talk to you today about courage, not the kind they put in movies, not the charging into battle kind, not the climbing mountains kind. I want to talk about the quieter, stranger, more devastating kind of courage, the kind that asks you to keep living when living feels like the hardest thing you have ever been asked to do, the kind that makes you say what you mean at the dinner table, even when everyone would prefer you stayed silent, the kind that lets you look at a version of your life that did not go the way you planned and say, still I choose this. Still I am here. Still I am not done. Because here is what I have learned after all these years. Getting older did not make me smaller. It made me braver. And that is not a platitude. That is not something I cross-stitched onto a pillow. That is a hard-won, blood and bone truth that I earned one difficult year at a time. When I was in my 20s, I was terrified of almost everything. I was terrified of saying the wrong thing, of being too much, of taking up too much space. I wore my politeness like armor. I smiled when I did not want to smile. I agreed when I did not agree. I made myself small and digestible and easy because I had learned somewhere along the way most women learn it, quietly, without anyone ever saying it out loud, that being easy was the same thing as being lovable, that shrinking was a form of grace, that if you just stayed small enough, soft enough, agreeable enough, everything would be fine. And for a long time, I believed it. For a long time, I thought that was wisdom. It was not wisdom. It was fear wearing a dress. The first time I remember feeling genuinely brave, not pretending to be brave, not performing courage for someone else's benefit, I was standing in a kitchen that no longer felt like mine, and I said no. Just no. Nothing dramatic. No slamming of doors, no great speech, just a quiet, clear, immovable no. And the world did not end. The ceiling did not fall. And I stood there in that kitchen, and I felt something shift inside me, like a tectonic plate moving, slow and enormous and permanent. Because I realized in that moment that I had spent decades waiting for permission to exist on my own terms. And the permission was never coming from outside. It was only ever going to come from me. That is the thing about growing older that nobody puts on the birthday cards. The older you get, the less patience you have for the performance. And losing patience for the performance is not bitterness. People will tell you it is bitterness. People will mistake your clarity for cynicism. But it is not. It is precision. It is the natural result of having lived long enough to know the difference between what matters and what merely feels urgent. And once you can see that difference, once you can feel it in your body, you cannot unsee it. You cannot go back to pretending. I have watched women my age become invisible, and I have watched them become luminous, and the difference between the two has nothing to do with how they look, or what they own, or whether their children call on Sundays. The difference is this: the invisible ones kept waiting. They kept waiting for someone to tell them it was their turn, for circumstances to finally align, for the right moment to arrive so they could finally begin living the way they always meant to. And the luminous ones, the ones whose presence fills a room, whose opinions carry weight, whose laughter sounds like it comes from the ground up, they stopped waiting. They decided. They made a unilateral, non-negotiable decision that they were already enough, and that the life they had was already worth showing up for fully, completely, without apology. Bravery in old age does not look like youth. Let me be very clear about that. It does not look like starting over, or reinventing yourself, or pretending that the years behind you did not happen or did not hurt. Bravery at this stage of life looks like integration. It looks like taking every hard thing that has happened to you, every grief, every failure, every version of yourself you had to leave behind, and saying, all of it. I claim all of it. Not just the pretty parts, not just the chapters I am proud of. All of it is mine. All of it made me, and I am not going to spend whatever time I have left pretending otherwise. I had to learn to stop apologizing for my history. That took longer than I expected, because there is a particular kind of shame that settles into women of my generation. A shame about having wanted things, about having needed things, about having made choices that cost someone something. We were taught to carry that shame quietly, to wear it like a locket close to our chest, never let anyone see it, but never be without it. And for years I carried mine that way. I thought the carrying was penance. I thought the carrying was what made me a good person. But here is what I finally understood. Shame is not the same as accountability. Remorse is not the same as self-destruction. You can acknowledge the ways you fell short without making a permanent residence of your failures. You can say, I did not do that well. I would do it differently now. And then, and this is the part that took me the longest, you can set it down. You can actually set it down and walk away from it. Not forever. Grief and regret are not things you bury cleanly. They come back on Tuesday mornings when you are making tea, and the light comes through a particular window at a particular angle and catches you off guard. But you can set it down enough to stop letting it make your decisions for you. And the day I stopped letting old shame make my decisions was one of the freest days of my life. If you've been finding yourself in these words, if something in you is nodding along, recognizing something you haven't had words for yet, I want you to take a moment right now and subscribe to Wisdom of Age, because this is a place where we tell the truth about getting older, not the polished version, not the inspirational poster version, the real thing. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me one thing you have stopped being afraid of as you have gotten older. One thing age gave you the courage to release. I read every single one, and you would be astonished how much your words matter. Now, let me tell you about the particular bravery of speaking your mind when you are old. When I was young, I edited myself constantly. I ran everything through an internal committee before it left my mouth. Is this too much? Will this offend? Does this make me seem difficult? The committee was exhausting. The committee was always in session, and for decades I listened to it, trimmed my thoughts down to their most inoffensive form, delivered them gently, framed them as questions when they were actually convictions, softened every edge until the thing I said barely resembled the thing I meant. I do not do that anymore. Not because I stopped caring about people's feelings. I care enormously about people's feelings. But because I realize that constant self-editing is not kindness. It is cowardice dressed up as consideration. Real kindness sometimes requires you to say the true thing, even when the true thing is uncomfortable. Real respect for another person means trusting them enough to be honest with them. And I was not doing that. I was protecting myself while calling it protecting them. The freedom that comes with saying exactly what you mean, with appropriate care, with genuine love, but with clarity and without apology, is a freedom I cannot overstate. People sometimes find it startling, younger people especially. They are not accustomed to women of a certain age speaking plainly. They expect us to soften, to defer, to wrap every opinion in so many layers of qualification that by the time we finish speaking, we haven't actually said anything at all. And when we don't do that, when we just say the thing, clearly and directly, and without the performance of uncertainty we don't actually feel, there is this moment of surprised recalibration. And I have come to love that moment. Not because I enjoy surprising people, but because I know that somewhere in that recalibration there is a younger woman watching and filing something away. Permission, maybe. Evidence that it is possible. That you can get to a place where your voice belongs to you. There is also the bravery of facing your own limitations, and I do not want to skip over this because it is the one that nobody celebrates, the one that doesn't make it onto the inspirational lists. But it is perhaps the most profound courage I have ever had to practice. Learning to ask for help. Learning to say, I cannot do this alone. Learning to receive care without constructing an elaborate story about what that receiving means about my worth, or my capability, or my future. Independent women, women of my generation especially, were taught to treat dependence as a kind of moral failure. You handled things, you managed, you did not burden others. And when the body began to have its own opinions about what was manageable and what was not, when the limitations became impossible to override by sheer force of will, there was a grief in that, a real and legitimate grief. But also, eventually, if you were willing to sit with it long enough, a relief. Because in the allowing of help, something opened. The pretense fell away, and what was left was something more honest and more intimate than anything I had experienced in years of determined self-sufficiency. Connection, real connection, the kind that can only happen when you let someone see you without the armor on. That took more courage than almost anything else I have done in my life, because ultimately that is what bravery in old age comes down to. It is not the absence of fear. Fear does not disappear. If anything, the older you get, the more clearly you can see what there is to lose, and that clarity can take your breath away on a bad morning. But bravery is not the absence of fear. Bravery is the decision you make in the presence of fear. It is the moment you feel the ground shifting beneath your feet and you plant yourself anyway. It is the moment you have every reason to close down, go quiet, make yourself small and manageable and easy, and you choose again to stay open. I choose to stay open. At this age, having seen what I have seen and survived what I have survived, I choose open. I choose honest. I choose present. I choose the dinner table argument over the comfortable silence. I choose the real conversation over the pleasant one. I choose to tell the people I love that I love them in full sentences, out loud, without embarrassment, even when it feels too large for the room. I choose to take up the space that is mine. I choose to use the voice I spent so many years apologizing for. And here is the last thing I want to leave you with, the thing I most want you to carry with you when you walk away from this today. The world will always try to convince you that getting older is a diminishing, that you are losing something with every year, becoming less of what you were, moving steadily towards some diminished version of your former self. And there is loss, yes. I will not lie to you about the loss. The losses are real, and they are heavy, and they deserve to be named and grieved properly. But there is something the world does not advertise, something the birthday cards don't say, something I had to discover the long way. You are also gaining. Every single year, you are gaining. You are gaining clarity. You are gaining the unshakable knowledge of your own survival. You are gaining the freedom that only comes when you have run out of patience for pretending. You are gaining yourself, the version of you that exists beneath all the performance and people-pleasing and fear, the version that was always there, waiting for you to get tired enough of everything else to finally come home to her. I came home to her. It took me longer than it should have, and the road was harder than I anticipated, and there were years I thought I had lost her entirely. But she was there. She was always there, quieter and tougher and more honest than I had remembered, but there. And every day I get to live in her skin, speak in her voice, move through the world with her particular kind of undefeatable openness. Every one of those days is not a consolation prize for getting old. It is the whole point.